Being the last speaker and listening to the previous speakers who have given pretty much all of your points throughout the day is an interesting experience. So rather than just thinking of this as another talk, think of it as John Medina's brain rules, that you want to hear it repeated so that you actually can remember this. So the GME system is complex, and what I'm going to do is take one bill that we evaluated in 2013 and talk about the elements of the bill that on the surface appear to be in favor of promoting the development of a primary care workforce, and our dissection of the bill that shows that it actually probably will just perpetuate the status quo. And that's what we talk to legislators about. So the complexity of the GME system is very important because who's going to pass the bills that correct it? It's going to be legislators who also need to understand about transportation and defense. And so when it comes down to healthcare, they're looking at ACA issues and maybe less about GME. So they rely on their legislative health aides to try and advise them. And this stuff is complex for any of us to get. And so even for the legislative health aides, it's difficult. So I think one of our jobs as we go forward is to try and educate the legislative health aides to understand some of the GME system and how it impacts legislation that may be written, because words matter and certain bills may not enact, if enacted, may not achieve their intent. So Kim said, "Do you understand how to use the clicker?" And I said, "It seems backwards." And it was because I was holding it upside down. So there were two bills, well, there's actually more than two, but two that we initially looked at that were written in 2013, the Schock-Schwartz bill and the Schumer-Nelson-Reed bill. Both were talking about increasing GME positions by 15,000. That's not really what I'm going to talk about today, whether that's good or bad. What we're going to talk about is dissecting the bill to understand how the bill is written, which health advisors that we spoke with thought it would promote primary care, where they, after we spoke with them, understood that it probably would not. So the bill that we're going to talk about as our example is the Schock-Schwartz bill that was from 2013, Training Tomorrow's Doctors Today Act. And so we, as Kim said, we did go around. It was actually kind of fun going back and forth between the House and Senate and Uber cabs. It made us feel really important to meet with everybody. So the Schock bill is a GME expansion bill to expand 15,000 positions over 5 years, so 3,000 positions per year. And there are two pools for applicants to apply. The first pool is 1/3 of the positions, or 1,000 in a year, would be cap relief pool, and the other 2/3 is the priority pool. And so what I have in red are sort of the key points, most of which have already been made here today. So the 1/3 or the cap relief pool, the priority there is to restore hospitals who had already expanded their GME positions above the cap, and they must also train at least 30% in primary care and general surgery to apply. And so most of the positions that were expanded above the cap were in specialty positions. They didn't need GME funding to be able to afford to expand above the cap. And then to use federal dollars to restore the hospitals for that decision is potentially a missed opportunity to promote primary care. Another feature of the cap relief pool is that hospitals need to be at least 10 positions above the cap. So for community-based hospitals that may have expanded by one position, might be a single family medicine residency, the likelihood is that they may not be more than 10 positions above the cap, and would be excluded. The other 2/3 is the priority pool. So the first priority, so it's broken into 4 priorities. The first priority is for hospitals with approved residency training programs affiliated with medical schools that have at least 40% of their graduates matched into primary care residencies in the preceding 5 years. The second priority is in hospitals in states with new medical schools. The third priority we'll skip. And the fourth priority is all other hospitals. So if you're a community program and you wanted to expand, it is stated that all of the hospitals that applied in the first or second or third priority need to have already received the maximum amount that they were entitled to before the fourth priority would even be considered. And all of the priorities and all in the cap pool as well are to hospitals. So it does not allow for expansion of GME funding positions to community programs that are not affiliated with a hospital. So the first priority, 40% matched into primary care. The wording matched changes the apparent intent. And so that actually has been discussed a couple of times today before this, but this is an example of where words matter. And as we've heard, most of those positions in internal medicine and many of those in pediatrics go on and subspecialize, and really looking 5 years after graduation from medical school is a more accurate indicator as to what they're going to be doing. And so I wasn't really going to use the term, but it is what's been called the dean's lie, where they may say 50 or 60% of their medical school graduates go into primary care, and it may be 7% in family medicine, and many of those that go into general internal medicine, again, will become hospitalists. So family medicine really is the only specialty where the majority continue to practice in primary care, and we just talked about the 5 years. The other point of the wording in the first priority is that it said affiliated with a medical school. So it would exclude family medicine residencies if they were not affiliated with a medical school. Second priority of funding to states in new medical schools, I think that it was said, I may have had this wrong, somebody said 100 miles. I thought I remembered something from the Graham Center that said 2/3 of graduating family physicians practice within 50 miles of where they did their residency. Regardless, 50 miles or 100 miles, the point is that if you're prioritizing federal funding for new cap slots to states with new medical schools, you're missing an opportunity to a substantial part of the United States, and in particular places that may have health professional shortage areas. The Shock Bill gave its own definition of primary care, and it included general surgery and psychiatry. And it didn't really meet most organizations' definitions of primary care, and I kind of doubt that most general surgeons or psychiatrists are managing hypertension and diabetes and making sure they're up to date on their immunizations. However, I think what their intent is to say that these are specialties in shortage, which I would agree, but you don't need to put it into statute to say these are now primary care practices or specialties. So once hospitals received the increased positions for the 5 years after the increase, the hospitals had to ensure that 50% of the positions that the new positions were attributable to were in shortage specialties. Now, the bill was written in 2013, and they made reference, and I think Hope talked about this, made reference to the 2008 HRSA report, which used 1998 data. And if you actually looked at Scott's graph of primary care in the late 1990s, that was in family medicine's peak time during the managed care time. And so it was not listed as a specialty that was in shortage, and neither was general surgery. So the key points of looking through this bill is that, again, the positions expanded above the cap were mostly specialty positions. When I did the paper that I wrote on this, it was actually cut off, I think, at 2007. There had been something like an increase of 700-something specialty positions and a decrease in 600-something family medicine positions. And so I think the family medicine positions have started to go back up, but those that were able to expand with the cap imposed were those that could afford to do so without the GME funding. Targeted new positions to programs with more than 10 positions above their cap and affiliated with an academic institution, so that excludes a lot of community-based family medicine residencies. Matched into primary care residencies, we've talked about. Limited to new medical schools, again, misses an opportunity to try and get the doctors to where they're needed across the country. Limited all expanded positions to hospitals, not to community programs. A new definition for primary care that I would choose to disagree with, and an outdated document to identify shortage specialties. So again, the GME system is complex, and the importance of this is that understanding these nuances can help people who read this to just not be told what New York or places that are in the have states are telling them, and be able to maybe render their own opinion. In addition, it can help those that wrote bills to potentially understand how to make a modification to the bill that could perhaps, if their intent was to increase the primary care workforce, make some simple changes in wording to that it might be able to do that. So when we met with the healthcare, the legislative health aides, we had literally several of them say, "Oh, I didn't know that," and we're co-sponsors on the bill. And so that's a bit frightening when the people who are signing on to a bill didn't actually understand what it would accomplish. So this is brief, and so we can either have time for questions or try and move our agenda along.
Might have time for one question. I think that was a nice summary.
But did it kill the bill? Or is it still alive?
Well, you never know what happens with I mean, technically the bill did not pass, but they still talk about both this bill and the Schumer bill, so some variant potentially could resurrect itself.
It's actually been reintroduced.
Oh, there.
So there's still a chance. Luckily, there isn't.
Can't hear.
Luckily, probably the wrong word choice. They're so costly that the environment right now is that Congress is not going to fund another 15,000 positions. But they were reintroduced this session with the same issues included.
So the answer is, it's alive.
All right. Thank you, Kent. Appreciate it.